Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to our Live Well Legal Network presentation for May. As many are aware, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're excited for this program today. Before I introduce our speaker, however, I want to thank our legal sponsors, Leisha Weston and Bill Ryan, for their continued support of the Live Well Legal Network. And with that, I will step aside and turn the floor over to Leisha Weston, who will say a few words about that network, its mission, and how, ideally, you can get involved.
Brian, I don't know if we have Leisha on. She might have got pulled into another fire drill, but I will. Leisha, are you there?
I see that she's just connecting right now, so she should be.
Perfect timing.
Well, that's good. I've got the slide up, so I couldn't see who joined and who hadn't, and perhaps did not make the right assumption. When her audio comes on, if somebody else can let me know.
You have to do your spiel again, Brian.
There we go. I think Leisha is unmuted now.
Hey, Leisha. We actually just got started and went through the many thanks that we had for you and for Bill Ryan for your support of the Live Well Legal Network, but wanted to give you a few moments to touch on it if you're still willing.
Sure. So I am honored to support this grassroots organization. It started within our legal department back in 2019, created by the attorneys after the unfortunate loss of some of our attorneys within our group and sort of the emotional reaction many of us had to the loss of their friendship, their professionalism, and the impact that they made in our teams. It is so important that all of us are well, both physically as well as mentally, and I think this year has certainly highlighted that fact and the importance of it in our daily lives. So really our mission is just to support each other and help each other along our path of mental wellness, and be a resource both on a personal and professional level with one another. So if you're interested in joining the network, you can find more about us on the AT&T legal website. But if you're interested in hearing more about upcoming events or getting involved, by all means, please feel free to reach out to Brian Lowe or Natalie Hall, and they can get you indoctrinated in the group. We have wonderful presentations like we're presenting today. So with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it back over to you so you can introduce our distinguished speaker.
Thank you, Leisha. We appreciate your ongoing support and that of Bill. I will comment the indoctrination is fairly light and takes more a form of welcoming than emphasis on hardcore doctrine. I'll go on to introduce Elle Michelle. Elle Michelle Smith, who you can see in the photo on the slide and who's with us today, is the CEO and founder of No Silos Communications, a media and consulting company that blends leadership development and strategic communications to develop high-performing executive leaders specializing in women's issues. She also advises the Fortune 500 companies that these professionals aspire to lead. Credentialed by the International Coaching Federation, she runs a private coaching practice, NSC Coaching, where she's worked with executives from AT&T, Warner Media and CNN, American Express, Microsoft, Amazon, Lenovo, Charles Schwab, and others. El Michelle is also the author of a best-selling book. It's called No Thanks, 7 Ways to Say, I'll Just Include Myself, a guide to rockstar leadership for women of color in the workplace. She's the creator, executive producer, and host of the Culture Soup podcast, which has been consistently at the top of the rankings on Apple Podcasts in the business and business news and business entrepreneurship categories. El Michelle has more than 25 years of experience as an elite award-winning communicator and integrated marketer at global agencies. Previously a contributor to Black Enterprise, El Michelle is an adjunct professor of strategic communications at the Texas Christian University Bob Schaefer College of Communications, where she also sits on the board of visitors. El Michelle has generously agreed to share her perspectives with us today, and we'll talk about how we can lead through change and thrive. We should be able to frame up a mindset that'll allow us to conquer our emotions, or the emotions that can come with change, and look for the opportunity that change represents, especially when the change in question is challenging, and including by attending to mental and emotional well-being and resiliency. Assuming there's time, I'll moderate a brief period of questions and answers following her presentation. To the extent that you have questions you'd like me to raise, if you can send them to me via the WebEx chat function, time permitting, I'll be glad to raise them with her. And lastly, I will mention that perhaps El Michelle's most distinguished claim to fame is that she once worked for AT&T. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn the time over to El Michelle.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate that introduction, to Natalie, to Charles, who have put this together, the rest of the committee and the network, the Living Well Network. Thank you so much for having me. Alicia, we also honor you today too. I appreciate the time to spend with you today. I am so grateful that the legal department has erected this network. It's so important. You probably know, just simply because of what you've been through. And we've been through a lot. Let me just tell you that we are all traumatized right now. But before we get into your trauma, I'm going to tell you a little bit about mine. The year was 2019, sitting at my desk, minding my own business, when an email dropped into my inbox. If it wasn't any other day, it'd probably just be like any other email, but this email was different. This email announced that my position had been surplused. And I looked at it. I wasn't shocked about it because the company was going through a lot of change during that time. But how I reacted to it might startle you. I actually looked at the email and I clapped my hands and I said, you know what? They just added to my story. That afternoon, I was to go to a university and guest lecture to some young people in a media and entrepreneurship class at the University of North Texas. So got in my car, had taken the second half of the day off, and rode out to Denton. And while I was reviewing my notes, pretty much like I was reviewing my notes before I spoke to you, I decided that I would share that information right up top. And I knew it would startle the young people that were there, but they needed to know that you could make it through change, not just survive, but thrive. So I took my position at the front of the class and I started my presentation. And I started it with a story, pretty much like I'm starting it now. And I told them that this email had come my way. And the class was stunned. They were frozen. And I said, yeah, surplus is a very nice way of saying layoff. And I do have about 60 days to find another position. But in the meantime, I want to introduce myself to you as the CEO of No Silos Communications, LLC. You see, staying compliant, I had started a business outside of my current position at that company. And I was nurturing some of the talents and the gifts that God had given me already. So I understood my value, and I also knew that there was something else that I could do. And during that time frame, I started the podcast, but I also started a mentoring platform called the 30-Minute Mentor. Now it's been rebranded since then, the NSC e-learning. But during that time, I was actually inspired by an officer who had taken me under his wing, who had given me 30 minutes a month on his calendar just to pour into me. That would be the beginning of me discovering my value. That's right. 25 years into my career, and I was just understanding what value I brought to the table. Now, ultimately, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had opportunities outside of the company, but I also had opportunities inside of the company because I found myself in the office of a very high ranking officer who was trying to strategize with me on how to stay. And he told me, there are enough of us here that want you to stay. If you want to stay, you can. But I was torn. I was torn because I had opportunities. I had spent time not just pouring into myself at that company with the wonderful learnings that I learned at that company, but I also poured into myself with a tribe. That's what I call my personal board of directors, and also upskilling. As I was building this podcast, I was learning more about technology and what it took to get it off the ground. I was also dusting off some skills that I already had as a serial entrepreneur. I had run an agency about a dozen years before for about a decade. So I knew what it was to run a business, but I didn't know what was in store for me moving forward. Here comes uncertainty. I want to talk to you about uncertainty and dealing with the unprecedented change, not just within your company, but also all around us. I like to call it the three beasts of the apocalypse. And here's what the three beasts are all about. We're living through the biggest health crisis that this nation has seen ever in history. Yeah, it's a pandemic. And while we're looking at the other side of the pandemic, hopefully, we're feeling a little bit more upbeat. We're getting vaccinated. We're making sure that we're planning to return to work, whatever that looks like, whether it's hybrid or you do a little bit more working from home. We're going through change. And some of you have watched loved ones pass away. You've taken care of loved ones. Some of you have even become ill. All of this while the second beast of the apocalypse was happening. You know what? This beast started before the pandemic, and it's a digital fractured economy. It's one that is very competitive and it's very high paced, and change is the order of the day. You've noticed inside of AT&T where you're moving as a company and trying to shift and become more agile so that you can become more competitive. With that comes a lot of change within that impacts people like you and me, people who are employees, people who are leaders. And that change sometimes doesn't feel good. The third beast of the apocalypse, of course, is going to be a cultural shift. And you're seeing that outside of the organization, inside of the organization. And we've been through all shades of it, y'all. It's not just the unprecedented civil rights movement that kicked off last year, where they say millions of people hit the streets and started to talk about real change in the face of the death of George Floyd. But you're also seeing that we saw shifts in politics, we saw leadership voids, we saw all sorts of things happen that we've never seen before. And all of it took a toll on us. We've been traumatized. And of course, some of you are also seeing that the job market has been impacted as a part of the shift in business. The people lost jobs. In fact, if you're a woman, and Brian noted that I have a special thing in my heart for women and women of color. I happen to be one. But we were forced out of the job market by the millions. And the job numbers that happened, that showed up in June, we first noticed it. And then we also started to see that when this return to work happens, many women are faced with the idea of, well, gee whiz, I'm the primary caretaker of these kids that are still, some of you are still doing online school. Mine happened right outside this door. So I understand it's tough. And now we're beginning to think, what does change look like for me? And I encourage you to really think about that question. In fact, along the way, if you will grab a journal, a pen, a piece of paper, because at the end of the day, while I am an author and I am a speaker, I'm a coach. So what we're going to do, I'm going to raise some probing questions, and I want you to journal through the answers. Really sit with them, because your answers are going to be your pathway forward to push through change and lead in a way that causes you to thrive and not just survive. But first, let me give you some stats. These are kind of crazy, y'all. Okay. So I went to the CDC and I also went to some other well-credentialed organizations to bring these stats to you. And if you can relate to some of this, I want to see you shout it out in the chat. Okay. 40% of the US adults reported struggling with mental health or substance abuse during COVID-19. I don't want to hear about the substance abuse, but if you know somebody that's been through mental health crisis, or maybe you have too, that's one of those invisible challenges that some of us deal with. Another one, the American Institute of Stress, the American Institution of Stress. They say that work-related stress causes 120,000 deaths and results in $190 billion in healthcare costs yearly. Global statistics show that an increasing amount of people are struggling with mental health issues, not just in the wake of COVID-19, but we're also adding on top of that the uptick of influx in the market right now. 55% of Americans are stressed during the day, according to Gallup. Now, some of you might have thought that, okay, this can't be too bad. I'm going to move home and work instead of working at the office. But how many of you discovered that there were hidden stresses right there at home, even if you didn't have young kids in school? How many of you, just today, I had to go fix a plumbing issue in my bathroom in the middle of my workday. We haven't had to deal with that, but you have to if you want to keep things going. Some of you had some first world problems. Maybe Instacart didn't deliver the groceries that you actually wanted. For me, they never get the avocados right. It may seem small, but that's a stress. And you keep adding those on top of things, and it piles on. And the more serious things, it piles on. According to Safety and Health magazine, researchers found a definitive decrease in the health of many workers who feared job loss to automation. Now, you guys are attorneys. You're not really thinking about that. You're critical thinkers. But at the same time, there may be other factors that may make you think, well, what's going to happen to me? That's stress too. Research has shown that during organizational change, employee stress levels rise and they lead to diminishing focus and bouts of depression and mood swings. How many of you have been through the situation where you just don't want to get up in the morning? It's hard to just drag yourself out of the bed and do what you know you need to do, whether it is take care of your family or just take care of the tasks during the day. It's one of the first signs of depression. Sometimes you have a to-do list that is so long that you just look at it and you feel overwhelmed. And you might get some of that low-hanging fruit done, but you don't get all of it done because the weight of it is just on you. That can be overwhelmed all the way up to depression. And I encourage you, if you have a therapist, if you don't have a therapist, look into it. A therapist can help you work through these issues. And then finally, and this is related to one of those beasts of the apocalypse, psychological safety in the workplace. And I'm talking about a workplace that may or may not be inclusive enough, one that's still trying to make it through, challenges of diversity and inclusion. For those of you that find yourselves in the margins, and some of us, it may be a matter of race, it may be a matter of an invisible diversity. You may be struggling with psychological safety. And here's what they have to say about this. Threats to psychological safety in the midst of racial tension for the marginalized people in the workplace can damage health, derail trust, disrupt relationships, and decrease feelings of belonging and diminish productivity. So there's something to it. If you have an AAPI colleague, I hope you checked on them lately. They don't have to be in California. If you have an Indian colleague, I'm talking about East India, have you checked on them? Are their relatives safe? What are they going through right now? If you have a Black colleague, I could go down the list. How are they feeling? And not just ask the question, engage them in an empathetic manner. Put yourself in their shoes. So let's get to it, okay? I'm going to give you 5 things, 5 ways to be more resilient through this unprecedented change. But first, let's talk about what resilience actually is. I like to say it's the ability to bend and not break. Resilience isn't absolutely positively just, being brave and not being fearless. It is that you've been through the crisis before, or you've been through a crisis before, and you call on the lessons that you've learned from that and the toughness that you've sustained through that. And like a skyscraper that stands many feet tall in the air, when the wind blows, it just bends a bit. It doesn't break. That's resilience. In fact, did you know that bravery and courage do not exist? They cannot exist without the presence of fear. So I'm not asking you to put down fear. Fear is a real emotion. You need to feel it. But resilience allows you to push through it, and that yields you courageous. So while we're talking about courage and resilience, I want you to know, give yourself permission to have the fear of the uncertain, to have the questions about what happens next. You need to have that because it actually drives you forward if you allow it. So let's get to the 5 ways that you can be resilient through this unprecedented time of change. It requires shifts. And there are 5 different shifts that I'm going to challenge you to make. And as I challenge you, I'm going to raise these questions and again, get your pen and paper and write down the answers. You may want to sit with it later, but just be sure that you answer the questions. That's the magic of coaching to get you moving forward. So the first thing that you need to do is shift your priorities. Now, we live in a society that tells us that if you pour yourself into your career, that you'll make the money, and then that money will enable you to buy or secure some happiness for your family and yourself. Now, that's the exact opposite of what applied positive psychology tells us. In fact, it flips that paradigm on its ear. In fact, completely 180. Applied positive psychology says that happy people are successful people. So you've got to shift your priorities. And instead of putting career first, and then your family, and then you, shout out to my women leaders out there, because we do this a lot. Men, we do it too, right? Okay. But women, we have this tendency to put everybody first. Are you like that? Who's an empath in the room, right? You tend to put other people's interests first, and we end up last. And let me tell you, there is wisdom in what the flight attendant tells us every time we take off on the plane. Put your mask on first and then help someone else. Why? Because if you aren't breathing and you're not able to breathe in that oxygen, how in the world can you help the person next to you? So think about it. Pour into yourself first, mind, body, and soul. Mind, body, and soul. So that means that whether you are going to be of a person, if you're a person of faith, that you are minding your spirit, okay? First and foremost, making sure that your spirit is being fed. This is the armor. This is the weapon that you're going to use to make through change. Your body and your mind are equally as important. Are you getting the exercise that you need? Are you eating what you should be ingesting to make sure that you're the strongest and performing at your optimal? In your body, are you making the time to move? It doesn't have to be a lot. Take that walk during that audio conference that you aren't leading. Take the walk. You need to prioritize you first, then family, then work. That's not how many of us do it. And we find ourselves burning the candle on both ends. So flip your priorities. And I want to ask you a question. What step will you take today to put you first? Mind, body, and spirit. And can you carve out 30 minutes a day? Now you're going to say, Michelle, you don't understand what's on my plate right now. I can't even control my calendar. But let me give you a secret. You are the only one that is responsible for your happiness, no one else. We're going to talk about prioritizing your attitude because happiness is key to success. Okay, let's keep going. Shift your attitude, engage gratitude. Okay, so it's one thing to sit in it and know that the world seems like it's falling apart, whether it's your company is going through so much change, or you're just watching the news or looking at your news feed. It's not hard to get wrapped up in the negativity that's going on. But one way that science has shown us through applied positive psychology to grab hold to your reality and feel better is to practice gratitude. I like to just say, what are you grateful for? And I practice this in the morning and I practice it at night. In fact, I've gotten my little girl involved. There have been times through this whole situation, and she's 8 years old, through the pandemic, where she has felt disconnected from her little friends socially. She's been disconnected from school. She finally went back to in-person school, but still. And then she was worried, Mommy, are you going to die? She wanted to know that. COVID-19 wasn't lost on anyone. It was so serious, she couldn't be at school. So we started doing something at night. And that was that I would ask her, what makes you happy? What are you grateful for? And she would start naming the things. And besides the fact that we had to cancel 2 Disney trips, she did say Disney World makes me happy. And guess what happened? Her face lit up. She started smiling. And I dare you to think of the thing that you're grateful for and not smile or feel a lift in your spirit. Gratitude is scientifically proven to produce hope. Hope is what you need to set goals. So put a thumbnail there. In order to set goals, you need hope. And in order to get to hope, you've got to be grateful. So you want to be grateful in the morning, you want to be grateful at night, pick your time. You might want to be grateful in the middle of the day. When that memo comes through of organizational change, what can you do to stop and have a moment of gratitude to reset your mindset? And that gets us to the next one. Shift your mindset. What is the opportunity to move your career and life forward despite the uncertainty? There's always a message in the mess. And I challenge you to look for the opportunity. In fact, the book that I wrote, I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm going to keep us moving because I know we're getting close to time. But the book that I just wrote was in the hands of a literary agent for almost a year. And that's post being in conversations with publishers about getting it out very quickly. And she was sitting on it. But I saw the opportunity. Even though I would have loved to have been published by a big publishing house and may still be, I took the reins in my own hands. I saw the opportunity to move forward because this message needed to be shared in this environment with these 3 beasts of the apocalypse. So sometimes you need to just shift your mindset from saying, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is terrible. What are we going to do? To what's the opportunity in it? So here's the question I want to leave for you for shifting your mindset. How can you utilize white space during your day to embrace creativity in order to find the opportunity? And what one thing can you commit to shift your career and your life into high gear? And that's one of the things that I actually did in the midst of that layoff. I shifted my mindset and I propelled myself into a totally different career. And here I am, I've got books and I'm speaking to you. Shift your demeanor, own your happy. I got to ask you, where's your happy place? It can be something that's mental. It could be an actual place. When's the last time you've been there? And how do you get back there? Okay. You need to find your happy because of what we've said already. Applied positive psychology says happy people are successful people. And deep down inside, I knew my value and therefore I knew how to tap into my happiness. Success is inevitable for people who focus on positivity and happiness. So here's a question for happiness and shifting your demeanor. Where's your happy place? Do you need to remove some things in order to get to that place? What's standing in the way of your happiness? That's a deep one. Please answer that question. And number 5, shift the uncertainty. Make sure that you don't allow yourself to be mired in the abyss of uncertainty. We are living in a time that is completely uncertain. How do you do that, though? What I want you to do is take account of the things that you know to be true. Take account of the things that you know. I guarantee you there's more that you know to be true than the uncertainties, the things that you don't know. Your leaders, I also want to challenge you to read the tea leaves. You've seen patterns. You know how to look back in history. How did we make it through 9/11? That's the way I challenge my leaders coming through COVID-19. It's a little bit different, but it's the one biggest crisis that this nation has been through since before the pandemic. There were lessons learned. How can you take what you learned in the past and apply it to what's in the future? Again, you're taking the things that you know and applying it against the things that you don't know. I'm talking about planning. So if you go back to the idea of, gee, you need hope to get to goals, and what fuels hope is gratitude. If you're making goals, I am encouraging you to make plans against them actively. And how do you do that? Ask yourself this one question. What can I do today to move one step closer? I'm not asking you to boil the ocean. I'm not asking you to set fire to the rain. I'm asking you, what is the one thing that you can do, that baby step that you can take to get you towards your goal? And you're on your way to a plan. And plans are the number one weapon against fear and uncertainty. And then finally, I want to leave you with this question. How will you move forward based on what I've shared with you today? 5 ways to shift your mindset, shift your attitude, shift your demeanor, shift and use resilience. How will you move forward today differently than you might have yesterday before hearing this message? Commit to a plan. Ask yourself, what are you holding on to that might be holding you back? Sometimes it's just the idea that this is the one place that I know. This is the one thing that I know. And you're holding on for dear life because you're fearful of what's on the other side. Again, if you dig into it, it takes away the fear of the uncertain. And then journal through the answers to these questions. I'm going to make sure that you all receive a digital tool that has all 5 of these shifts that you need to work through. After this presentation is over, I'm going to make sure that Brian has it, and I will put it on my website, lmichellesmith.com. Very, very simple. Go download it. You can print it off. You can put it on your desktop because it's electronic too. And I only wish you well. I want to make sure that you guys are leaning into the positivity in the moment. And it may seem that it's bleak right now, but I promise you, there is always, always an opportunity in the uncertainty. Brian?
Thank you so much, Michelle. We really appreciate your comments today. We've got a few minutes that I'd love to ask you a few questions. And if folks have additional questions, I would encourage you to text me directly via the chat function, and I will try to get to them. I did get one question that came in, and I've got several of my own, if no more.
Good. Awesome.
But one of the questions is, how should we deal with the challenge of doing less with more?
Oh, okay. You know, again, I would lean into the question, what is the opportunity? Now, we've been in companies, we've been in situations where we have a champagne idea or project, and we've been given a light beer budget. And at the end of the day, you need to understand too, what is it that you know to be true? How can you optimize the tools that you have in your hand? But you need to answer the question, what is that opportunity? And so often we go directly into panic mode, and we go directly into the stress of it and say, this can't be done. You need to dial that back a bit and pull in a positive affirmation that will allow you to think through clearly what opportunities you have in front of you and what options you have in front of you. In fact, my last position, I didn't have a huge budget, but we were able to do some amazing things just simply keeping it smart. So I would tell you, ask the question, what's the opportunity in it? And then I'd also ask you, how can I make this the smartest, not the most incredible, but the most smartest attack to this project or initiative that I absolutely can? And I think you will find that while you're being positive, you're going to uncover some opportunities that you may not have seen had you just sat in the negativity of the challenge.
That makes sense. So I had another question that I thought of while you were speaking. So one of the points you touched on was the importance of shifting your demeanor and
Yes.
choosing to be happy. I feel like, and this is maybe too much armchair psychology, but I feel like this comes more easily to some people than others. That some people are either blessed or cursed with a happier and brighter demeanor than others, and other people are blessed or cursed with a more dour or perhaps realistic.
Okay, so you're saying armchair psychology. Let's go there, okay?
And I wonder, given that there's such a broad range
Yeah.
in kind of personal predispositions, how can you do that if you're at one end of the spectrum versus another? What are the means to getting that done?
So absolutely, there is a difference. We have found through research that some people have a tendency towards more happy, more positive than others, and it may be a result of their experiences. Again, happiness is something that is up to you. If you decide that that happiness lies outside of you, that your experiences actually stop you from getting access to happy, you will stay unhappy. So, what you have to do is lean into those values that you have that everyone holds. They may be different from for other people, but there are specific values that you hold that make you feel a certain way. For some people, it's family. For some people, it is the ability to produce and actually provide for their home and their family. For some people, it's music. It could be anything. Okay, find your passion points, and this is how we're going to get to the happy. Because I guarantee you, there are some things out there that make you smile, even if you were the most negative person out there. There is something that makes you smile, and you need to find what that is and integrate that into your life more frequently. And then on top of that, you've got to practice gratitude. There are things that have happened in your life that may have been tragic, but I promise you that there is something, a silver lining somewhere. If you look for it, you'll be able to find that your entire life has not been tragedy. Let's look at those things that have actually generated smiles and happiness and joy. And you need to make an intentional attempt to focus on those things so that you know that there's the possibility, again, we're back to hope, that hope will drive you to know that there is a possibility for you to be happy moving through the challenge despite.
That all makes sense. I appreciate your comments. So another question has come in. I'd love to get your perspective on.
Sure.
It is what you might recommend that we might be able to do to help our colleagues deal with changes or shifts going on in their lives.
Lead
I mean,
with empathy.
referring to the recording of this presentation, but beyond
Sure.
that, or anything.
Lead with empathy. Okay. Empathy is core to emotional intelligence. And for those of you, you probably know this, you've been around and professional for a while. Emotional intelligence is your ability to see how other people respond in environments, understand it, and then understand how you interact with those people too. Core to emotional intelligence is empathy. And that's simply saying, I need to take a walk in someone else's shoes. So if you could take a moment and understand try to comprehend what your colleague just might be going through. That may take some education. You may need to Google about it. Let's take the psychological safety, for example. If you have someone who is in your work group who happens to be a person of color that's going through something right now, the only way that you might be able to empathize with them, if you are not of color yourself, is to understand what they might be going through. Google is your friend, okay? There's a lot out there that's been written by professionals that actually delves into the mindset of people who are going through this kind of trauma. Find out what that might be. The other thing is to nurture an environment that allows people to feel like they're safe enough to even discuss these things, or that they're safe enough for you to even engage in that way. It could be touchy. It could be the loss of a loved one. Maybe they don't even want to talk about it. But you need to have a relationship established with your colleague that is solid enough that you feel that you actually can even broach the topic. In other situations, you might want to tap into the people that have those relationships. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to say, I will him. And I promise you that will trigger things in you that you may not have even known you had, to engage with your colleague in a way that will allow you to help them to move forward.
Thank you, El Michelle. I think that sounds like really great and topical advice for these times and the situations that we're all going through.
Awesome. I
And
appreciate
unless
the time.
anybody else has other urgent questions, in which case, please text me very quickly. I think, El Michelle, we'd like to thank you for your time and wish you well. We've been, I feel like, enlightened and encouraged and really blessed by your comments today. And I, at least speaking for myself and hopefully for the group, I'm grateful for them. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to engage with each and every one of you. Some of you I've worked with in the past. Shout out to you. And for those that I'm just meeting today, I invite you to connect with me online afterwards, okay? And I think Brian may have a slide with all the ways that you can on social media and over email. Thank you.
Yes, I'll share it right now, and thank everybody for your time. And I'll leave it up for a few moments while people sign off. El Michelle, thank you once again.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks, Natalie and Charles and everyone. Take care.